Hello everybody, and welcome to the Friday edition of Video Clips. And Friday I usually talk about the consequences of this COVID mess and the real impact on real people, which is heartbreaking. I'll start with this, broken heart syndrome. It's officially known as stress cardiomyopathy and sometimes called broken heart syndrome. It can develop in response to severe emotional distress, and it often feels exactly like a heart attack to the person who's experiencing. So it can be chest pain, shortness of breath, irregular heartbeats, even fainting, but the person doesn't have blocked arteries. I mean, it's not typical heart disease. Sometimes the person can even go into what we call cardiogenic shock, which means the heart just can't pump enough blood to meet the body's needs because of the flood of stress hormones overwhelming the heart's ability to pump. Well, according to a study done at Cleveland Clinic, the COVID-19 debacle has caused a significant increase in the incidence of broken heart syndrome. People are worried about their jobs and their families, and the stuff that you hear me talking about every week. It's going on everywhere, and people at Cleveland Clinic have noticed it. The clinic has seen an increase in the number of patients who are being admitted with broken heart syndrome, and reports that these patients are staying in the hospital a lot longer than the patients who were previously admitted to the hospital for this condition. By the way, the treatment is medication to lower blood pressure. Cleveland Clinic's doctors recommend several strategies for dealing with life these days. First of all, contacting your health provider. Now, how that would lower your stress levels is beyond me. You can have your temperature taken and wear a mask and have a fake COVID test and sit in the car and wait for somebody to call you in until you're allowed to come in. I mean, that would really help with your stress levels a whole big bunch, right? They also recommend meditation, connecting with family and friends. Apparently, they're not aware that our emperor here says barbecues and connecting with people is a bad idea. It's very dangerous with 12 people in the hospital. So anyway, here's the best recommendation. Stop this nonsense. I mean, I just it just escapes me how anybody can be this cruel to people. But speaking of cruel to people, Steve Daniel has early onset Alzheimer's disease, and he lives in the memory care unit of a nursing home in Florida. For 144 days, his wife, Mary Daniel, could not be in the same room as her husband and was only allowed to see him through a window. He did not understand, and he just cried. In order to see her husband, she got a job as a dishwasher at the nursing home and was finally allowed to hug her husband. You see, the virus does not attack people who wash dishes and then interact with people. It's only if you don't wash dishes and interact with people. So her coming in from the outside to see her husband and hug him, bad. Washing dishes and then going down the hall to hug him, good. I mean, it just defies logic, right? Well, it worked for this particular family, but Florida has added an additional 60 days during which you can't go see nursing home patients, and not everybody can get a job in the nursing home in order to see their family members there. So to help other families, Daniel did a really nice thing. She created a support group on Facebook, and people are posting just horrible stories. One woman says, "My mom has been in a nursing facility after a massive stroke for 14 years, and I visit her every day. I tried one time to sit at her window, and it honestly made the situation worse. Her short-term memory is not good, and every day we repeat the same story about why I haven't been there to see her." Another wrote, "I placed my husband Dennis in memory care in October. He had Alzheimer's disease. Quarantining was a disaster for him. My kind and loving husband became very agitated and aggressive and declined rapidly." Great moments in public health. Here's another story. One of my closest friends in the world has Parkinson's disease. He also had lupus since he was 17. The man walked across the Grand Canyon with me not once but twice. Parkinson's has taken a toll, and he's barely able to walk now. As if that wasn't enough, he developed a series of microfractures in his back. Surgery was not an option because of the long-term steroid use to control the lupus. He's in great pain and spent 2 weeks in the hospital before being transferred to a quote-unquote rehabilitation center a couple of weeks ago. Because of the criminal COVID-19 restrictions, he has allowed no visitors, even his wife. He's now having some dementia and hallucinations caused by the Parkinson's and the drugs used to control it. Since he can see none of those who love him, he feels totally abandoned. All this because we're so afraid of a virus. We suspend all common sense and decency. You know, it really is. We've suspended all decency, all human decency. Again, the Nazis never thought of this type of diabolical thing. I mean, they thought of very diabolical things with concentration camps, but they never came up with a way to torture the entire population this way. I mean, this just like I said, Hitler must be smiling from the grave. I'm writing to you again this time regarding my 81-year-old father, who I have not seen since early March. He He's a long-term resident at Stony Brook Veterans Home in New York. He's a stroke survivor and lost his ability to verbally communicate for himself. Back in April, he was sent alone to Stony Brook Hospital with an infection. I was denied visitation rights. I prayed for the best outcome and mourned his loss due to all the hype over coronavirus. I assumed it was a death sentence. Shockingly, he survived, only to come back to the nursing home and contract COVID. He survived and received 2 negative tests weeks ago. If he's not high risk, I don't know who is. Since then, I've been calling the nursing home and demanding answers. I wrote to my local assemblyman and was told it's in Governor Cuomo's hands. They added legislation to allow local leaders to make decisions like this were killed. A few days ago, the news reported visitation at nursing homes in New York is allowed in big red letters. I was so excited. The local paper put out an article, "Visiting can resume at nursing homes, State Health Department." Don't get too excited. There's not so small unreasonable mandate. The facility has to be COVID-free for 28 days, all staff and patients. No patients have had the virus for 28 days at this point, but the clock was just reset because of the staff. They're on day 5. Also, an administrator at the home informed me that although staff members are showing no more symptoms, they continue to receive negative test results. It's happening to everyone, she said. I can't even bring myself to communicate this new heartbreaking restriction to my mother, as I was misled by the news story on TV about visitation resuming. She cries every day and she wants to see my father as his health has been declining. He's back on pureed food at this point. I wanted to bring this to your attention. The nursing home's phone is ringing off the hook with similar calls. I requested to be put in touch with other families with the same concerns, but this violates HIPAA. I requested they take my name and number to give to other family members calling and was told it's not allowed. Why are these injustices allowed? This all violates my father's rights and all the other residents. Please help. And the way we can help, makeamericans.freeagain.com. We need numbers to make our plan work. My sister-in-law lives in Victoria, British Columbia. She's had severe rheumatoid arthritis for over 20 years. Her hands are very crippled and one hand was so bad that she could no longer hold a coffee mug. She was scheduled for hand surgery in March, but of course that was canceled because it was an elective procedure due to COVID. Luckily, when the hospitals finally reopened in June for non-COVID procedures, she was one of the first ones rescheduled. This was a scary surgery. They had to break all the bones in her fingers and reset them and replace all of her knuckles. I'm not sure of the details of how they did this. On the morning of her surgery, her husband had to drop her off at the hospital entrance and leave her there alone. My sister-in-law had to wait alone, worried and frightened, for 2 to 3 hours for her surgery without the loving support of her husband by her side to comfort her. This is humanity at its best. My children's high school principal, Tommy, was the best school principal I've ever met. I spent 6 years with Tommy on school council. He ran the school well. He was open and honest with parents, kind-hearted yet firm, and the students adored him. Unfortunately, he had a progressive neurological condition similar to ALS and was forced to retire early by a narrow-minded superintendent, even though he was completely competent to carry out his duties as principal. Once the job he loved was taken away from him, his health rapidly declined. He went from a walker to a wheelchair and needing a 24/7 personal attendant. This past January, Tommy ended up in a hospital. He's lost all movement and the ability to speak, but his mind is still 100%. The first hospital he was admitted to was close to home. He had daily visits from his wife and other family members. His wife set up an iPad for Tommy to have in the hospital so she could communicate with him from home, set up Zoom meetings with other family members who were out of town, play Jewish services for him to watch, and communicate her husband's needs to hospital staff since he has no ability to communicate or advocate for himself, and everybody's separated from him due to the lockdown. He was transferred to another hospital further away. No family members allowed to visit at all. Religious services, and more important than ever, not allowed to happen. But this hospital wasn't open-minded to the iPad. They took his iPad away from him and only allowed him to use it 1 hour per day. When the family complained to the hospital administration, they brought in their big gun hospital lawyers. So for 23 hours a day, this poor man who served his community for 37 years in education and had a positive impact on thousands of young people is forced to lie in a hospital bed alone with no family contact or connection to the outside world. This is truly a fate worse than death. It's heart-wrenching. We've lost our humanity. Just because, I think, and the woman's right, it's quite possible that the reason they don't want him on that iPad all day is they're afraid that it would be noticed that the staff wasn't giving him much attention and that sort of thing. Couples celebrate 67th anniversary apart. Couple in a nursing home in Pennsylvania, been married for 67 years, had to be apart on their anniversary due to COVID. The reason they couldn't be together is they require different levels of care, so they're in a different place in the nursing home. So they haven't seen each other for 127 days. They've contacted their local politicians, who of course offer no help because they simply don't care and have any humanity. And if they decide to break the rules and spend any time together, they could be fined $300 a day, because that's what you do to elderly people who've been married for 67 years and want to spend time together. You fine them $300 a day. You take the poor man with a neurological disease that has caused him to not be able to even move his finger, but he's mentally intact, and you deprive him of all interaction with the outside world except for 23 hours a day. These are crimes against humanity. Crimes against humanity. And the people responsible for this will pay. Until my dying days, I will work on making sure that the people who have done these things to these people pay. It's not, what they're doing to everybody is horrible, but what they're doing to children and adults is it's just beyond comprehension. I mean, I know the stories are true and they're going on here in Ohio all the time. I know people who've been personally affected, but I still sometimes just shake my head and think you're going to wake up tomorrow and find out this was all just a terrible nightmare. But it isn't a nightmare. We're living it right now. All right, well, I thought we should finish the week on something. We have to have a lighter moment. So I'll just read this to you. If I did, I started the week with how do I keep my sanity? I try to find something to laugh about every day. And hopefully you'll think this is funny too. Working at an archaeological dig in the Valley of Elah, Bible experts have come up with an interesting theory concerning the death of Goliath, hulking giant of the Philistines, who fought David in one-on-one combat. Though he did have severe head trauma and neck problems, his death is now being counted as a COVID-19 death. Quote, while we didn't test him per se, he exhibited a lot of the symptoms of COVID-19, said one Bible scholar as he carefully worked to unearth some ancient face masks from Bible times. The wooziness, the falling down, the headache, it's all pretty clearly indicative of the novel coronavirus. He also stated that the virus ran rampant among the Philistines because they did not social distance, while Israel was relatively safe because King Saul declared a lockdown. One researcher suggested that Goliath did not die of coronavirus, but simply OD'd, having been stoned. But then the other researchers realized he was telling a dad joke and told him to shut up and keep digging. At publishing time, scholars have proposed that everyone who died in the flood, the Israelite conquest of Canaan, and the flattening of Sodom and Gomorrah also died of COVID-19. And I would add to that, I am sure, when they start digging up more of the Egyptian pharaohs and mummies, we will find out that COVID-19 was also the cause of death for most of them, because many of them died young. And it certainly wasn't because of infectious disease and the kinds of problems that happened at that age, insecure food, all that. Bad diets, actually, a lot of them had. But we think that COVID-19 was around at the time of the Egyptian pyramids, and we're going to find out that a lot of those people, when we get some testing done, had died of COVID-19. So anyway, we try to finish the week on a little bit of a humorous note, and that's it for the week. I'll be back to you next week with more news. Pass this on to people who you think would enjoy watching it. My email address is pampopper@msn.com. We will survive this. We will find a way to get to the other side of this. We will make the criminals pay for what they did, and we will build a better life for ourselves, because we have to do that. We just have to do it. MakeAmericansFreeAgain.com. Go there, sign up, get engaged, help us. All right? Help us so we can help you. Thank you for watching. I'll be back next week.